Welcome to Posturous Powers Podcast, Episode 1. Most people don't realize this, but they've been given the wrong advice about posture for most of their lives. I don't mean slightly wrong, I don't mean incomplete, I mean fundamentally wrong. Wrong in a way that doesn't just fail, but actively moves people into dangerous positions. I know that because I believe it myself for more than 15 years. I trusted it, I practiced it, I defended it, and the longer I defended it, the more I trained it into my nervous system. And I paid the price for it with my own body. What makes this especially dangerous is what advice usually comes from people who seem confident, educated, and well intentioned. Trainers, therapists, doctors, instructors, people who speak with certainty, people who sound like they know what they're talking and what they are doing. So, the confidence is exactly what makes the trap work, because when something doesn't work, the blame is quietly shifted back onto you. You didn't do it long enough, you didn't do it consistently enough, you didn't activate the right muscle and all such things. You didn't restore mobility where you're stiff, you didn't move enough, so you try harder, you double down, and that's how people get gaslighted. Not always with bad intent, but with a system where the method can fail forever and the responsibility always returns on the person who's suffering. And while you're blaming yourself, you're being guided, adjusted, and corrected in positions that actually shorten the body, especially the back. Positions that look upright, positions that look disciplined, positions that look good, but mechanically they are dangerous. And over time, they lead to exactly the problems so many people are struggling with today. Disc herniations, chronic back pain, neck pain, head pain, jaw problems, TMJ, breathing issues. These problems didn't appear randomly. They followed patterns. They followed repeated corrections. They followed years of being moved into the same wrong directions. At some point, you have to stop and ask yourself a simple question. Well, if I've been doing all the right things for years, why am I not getting better at it? That question is uncomfortable because it forces you to consider something that most people don't want to consider. It forces to consider that the advice itself might be wrong, the method might be wrong, that the corrective actions might be the thing that is correcting you in the wrong direction. So let me say it clearly that you have to open your eyes. If something doesn't work or you make very little progress after a long time, you have to stop falling onto the same idea. You have to stop falling in the same trap. Because the trap is not only physical, it's mental, it's psychological. It's the belief that if you just do more of the same advice, you will eventually get results. But if the advice of moving you into the shortening, then doing it more consistently just makes you shorter more consistently. And most people listening to this have already tried many things. They have already spent years trying to fix themselves. They have already done mobility work, they have already done routines, they have already done posture drills, they have already followed programs, and they repeated the same cues over and over again. And if you're honest, the core issue never changed. Maybe you felt temporary relief, maybe you felt it worked, but you didn't reorganized. You didn't get wider, you didn't bring the body finally to a stable, balanced system. You felt you were always being fixed, always correcting, always chasing the thing that never arrived. And the moment something doesn't work, instead of questioning the idea itself, people are trained to search for another isolated fix, another exercise, another routine, another cue, another small correction. And the loop continues. This podcast exists to stop that loop. Because if you look around you today, you'll see a very clear posture pattern almost everywhere. In gyms, on the street, in daily life. It's what I would describe as a disorganized state of the body. The torso is crumbled, shortened, narrowed, and this isn't because people are weak or lazy. It's because modern life trains this pattern into us every single day through repetition, and the nervous system accepts these errors as normal. And once the nervous system accepts the pattern as normal, the pattern stops feeling wrong. It starts feeling familiar. It starts feeling like home, even if it's harming you. That's why this is dangerous, because you can be in a pattern that is objectively shortening you, but subjectively feels normal. So when you try to change it, the correct direction can feel strange, unable, or even wrong. And the wrong direction can feel disciplined and correct. That is one of the biggest reasons why most mainstream posture solutions don't work. They focus on symptoms. They rely on end gaining, quick exercises, isolated drills. They don't question the thinking that creates the movement in the first place. Over time, chronic shortening of the body has a consequence. It affects the back, it affects the head, it affects the jaw, it affects the breathing, it affects the whole system. And yet, the advice people receive keeps returning to the same themes. Strengthen more, move more, so you stay in the loop and you keep shortening while you think you're improving. Now let me go through the wrong advices clearly, one by one, show you why it traps people. One of the most common pieces of advice is to build endurance in the right muscles. Build endurance, build stability, build postural endurance. It sounds logical, because endurance is a real thing. Muscular endurance is defined as the ability of a muscle to exert force repeatedly over time. And yes, endurance matters in life, but posture is not an endurance problem in the way people think. What's missing in most bodies is length, not just strength, not just endurance, length. Muscles need to be able to reach their full length, especially at their most lengthened position. Because if you build endurance in a shortened system, you reinforce the shortening, you don't fix it, you train it. You become very good at holding your body in a compressed shape. So when someone tells you build endurance in the right muscles, you have to ask, endurance in what geometry? Endurance in what structure? If the back is already shortening, building endurance can simply teach you to tolerate the shortening longer. And the symptoms can still show up because the structure is still wrong. Then there is the advice of restoring mobility where you're stiff. This is one of the biggest traps because it can consume years. I tried for years, sometimes 4 hours a day. And I'm not saying this lightly, I mean it seriously. Years of trying to restore mobility. Tight areas, stiff areas, opening, rolling, stretching, mobilizing. And the result for many people is exactly the same. You get some movement in one area, but you create imbalance in another area. You lose one link and the chain compensates by tightening somewhere else. So what actually happened to me and what happens to many people is simple. The wrong muscles get longer and the wrong muscles get shorter. So mobility without structure doesn't fix imbalance, it just moves it around. This is why it can feel like you're always working, always doing the right thing and still not changing. Because the body is a chain. If you don't treat it like a chain, you create random results. You can't just open one piece and expect the chain reorganized by itself, especially if the nervous system keeps the old pattern as default. Then there is the advice to simply move more, regular movement. Walk more, run more, do more sport. But if you walk wrong, you reinforce the wrong pattern. If you run wrong, you multiply it. If you sit wrong, you lock it in. Movement is not automatically corrective. Movement is repetition, and repetition trains the nervous system. Maybe nothing dramatic happens after 1,000 repetitions, but after 10,000, after years of habits, the body pays the price. So just move more is not a solution if the movement is organized wrong. It's just more volume of the same arrow. And there's the short routine cap, 8 to 10 minutes. 4 to 6 days per week. It's one of the most common marketing formats because it's easy to sell and it's easy for people to believe, but logically it doesn't hold up. If 99% of your movement is wrong, what should change in the 1%? What exactly is the 1% doing that magically overrides the rest of the day? Most people never get a real answer. And if you think about it, it doesn't make sense because the nervous system is trained by the majority of repetition. The majority of the day is reinforced as a shortening pattern. Then a small routine can only help if it changes the rest of your day. And most routines don't do that. They become a ritual and the rest of the day stays the same. Now let's talk about the cues and exercises that are not only ineffective but destructive. One of the most destructive cues ever given to us is shoulders down and back. This shortens the back. It creates compression while pretending to create posture. People are told they have rounded shoulders, so they try to fix that by pulling the shoulders back. But in reality, many people are already retracting their shoulders too far back relative to the chest. They squeeze the shoulder blades together, narrowing the upper back and pushing the middle torso forward. What looks like opening the chest actually worsens the overall organization. And there is also a mechanical truth that many people ignore. Down and back is not possible because if you go back, you will go up. So people strain, they force depression, they compress, they collapse, and they call it posture. But the shoulders don't belong back. They belong forward, out, and down. And you can see this clearly if you look at the clavicles. Seen from the front, you want straight clavicles. Seen from the top, you want straight clavicles. That's the geometry. Down and back does not produce the geometry we want. It creates a different structure that shortens the back. Now I also want to talk about mewing, because this is a topic where a lot of people put all their hope into one part of the body. No bad blood for Mike Mew. In my eyes, he's changing the world with his theories. I talk with him personally too, and I have nothing against him. He told me to watch out for my lower back, but I wouldn't stop at the mouth and not at the lower back. The body functions as a whole, so we have to change it as a whole. And here's an example why in my eyes, mewing is not the definitive solution if treated in isolation. We have some bony parts that should go up and others that should drive down. If something that is meant to drive down is coming up, then something else has to do the work of the other one. So it should go up, but it will go down. For example, the foot. If you don't drive the instep into the floor, the outside of the foot and the little toes will take over this action. And so you start to shorten the body from the bottom up. That shortening follows the whole chain up to the mandible. Do you remember? Something goes up, so it needs something other that goes down. Yes, in that logic, the mandible at the back will go up because it becomes the support that is missing. And so the front of the mouth will go down. And if you repeat those bad movements for a long period of time, this can lead to a downward growing face. So again, the body is a chain, you can't stop at one part. Now, let's go into what I call the destruction non plus ultra, because there is a big difference between advice that simply does not help and advice that actively makes you worse. There are things people do every day believing that they are fixing posture, while they are actually training compression, training narrowing, and training shortening. And if you repeat the wrong thing long enough, it stops being an exercise. It becomes your default organization. It becomes how you stand, how you breathe, how you move, how you sleep, how your whole system behaves. And the first one I have to name is the chin tucks. Chin tucks are sold like a clean, simple solution. 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps, 3 to 5 second holds. It sounds harmless. It sounds controlled. It sounds like good technique. For me, it was the destroyer that gave me the last knockout because it trains exactly the wrong direction. It pulls the head back and down into compression. And when you do that, you don't just change the look onto the neck, you change the whole function. You change the airway, you change the breathing, you change the relationship between head, neck, ribcage and spine. And the people are surprised when they start having problems that feel unrelated, even though the chain is obvious. I was studying the Alexander technique in Milan, and there they told me that if I want to improve my posture, I need to do chin tucks every day. But that's not like FM Alexander was, and not like the initial Alexander technique says. The initial direction is not head pulled back, it's head forward and up. That difference is everything. Head forward and up is organization, head back and down is compression. And once you train compression long enough, the problems start. For me, it became obsession. Day in, day out, and the symptoms began to appear. No chin, compressed airway, sleep apnea, and then you end up in a situation where you sleep on the back and unconsciously do this chin tuck and close down your airway. You do something that is supposed to improve posture and it ends with a result that affects how you can breathe at night. That is not improvement, that is a warning sign. This is the body telling you you trained the one direction. And this is exactly why I say don't fall in the trap. Because once you've been told this is correct, you can do it full discipline and still destroy yourself. That's the gaslighting part. Not always intentional, but real. You are following the instruction and the instruction is wrong. Now, chin tucks are not the only destructive one. Another big one is scapular, retractions, and band rows. 2 sets of 10 to 15. Again, it's packaged like a basic posture training. Retract the shoulder blades, strengthen the back, fix your rounded shoulders, but you have to ask the real question, not the fitness question. Not do you feel it working, but what shape does it train? Do you want broad shoulders or do you want to be shaped like a square? And even more concrete, do your shoulders get wider or tighter, seen from the front if you do a retraction? It gets tighter. It narrows the body from the front. And if you repeat that day in, day out, if you train in retraction as your default, you start doing it every time you raise your hand. Every time you reach, every time you move, the retraction becomes your movement strategy. And when people ask themselves why they have shoulder problems later or why they have back problems, it's not mysterious, it's trained. This is what people miss. A single exercise is not only a single exercise if you repeat it. It becomes a direction, it becomes your idea of good posture. And once your nervous system accepts that direction as correct, it will apply it in everywhere, not just in the set of 10-15. That is why these things are so powerful in the wrong way. They leak into daily life. Now let's talk about wall angels or shoulder Ws. 2 sets of 6 to 10 slow reps. These are usually presented like a clean corrective drill, but in my eyes this is the rib flare exercise. I call it the back shortener. It encourages the exact rib position that shortens the back. Look at the lower rib and where the upper sternum is. You will see that on every picture you search on Google, you can see that the lower front rib is too far forward from the instep spot and the upper sternum. And what does that lead to? It leads to a shortened back. So the person thinks, I'm opening the chest, I'm improving posture, but mechanically they are creating more rib flare, more forward ribs, more shortening in the back. It's not opening, it's disorganizing the chain. And when this becomes popular, it creates a whole culture of rib flare obsession. People start chasing thoracic extension. They start thinking the answer is always more. Open upper back, more extensions, more chest up. But if the lower ribs are driving forward and the sternum relationship is wrong, that obsession is not a solution. It is feeding the pattern. Now add the doorway stretch 2 times 30 to 45 seconds. People love this because it feels like something is stretching, and feeling a stretch becomes proof that you are fixing. But we need a full stretch and not a single stretch, because the body is surrounded by connective tissue. The body is a chain. If you stretch one area alone, you can create random imbalances in the chain. That's why I say you should stretch the whole chain at the same time so that random imbalance cannot happen. This point is important because most of the mainstream world treats the body like separate pieces. Stretch this, strengthen that, mobilize this, release that. But the body does not function as a separate piece. The connective tissue network make it one system. So if you keep acting on it like a collection of isolated parts, you keep producing isolated results. And isolated results inside a chain create compensation. Compensation means something else has to do the work, something else gets stressed, something else gets shortened, something else becomes the new problem. And then we have the thoracic extension over femoral. Again, this is usually presented as harmless, like just open the upper back. But the question is, why all this rib flare hype? Because many people don't even see what they are doing. They believe that they are extending the thoracic spine, but in reality, they are driving the ribs forward and creating the exact patterns that shortens the back. And this connects to what I call the fun fact. That's why bodybuilders crush their back and need to have surgeries and take painkillers. Because if you combine rib flare patterns with heavy loading and repetition, the back pays the price. Maybe not today, maybe not after one workout, but over time, with years of repetition, the system breaks where it's most vulnerable. And then people call it bad luck or genetics or aging, but the pattern was trained. So when you look at these destroyers together, you start to see a bigger picture. The problem is not only that the advice is wrong. The problem is that it is repeated and normalized. People repeat it without measuring the results. People repeat it because it's common. People repeat it because an authority said it. People repeat it because it feels like discipline, and the longer they repeat it, the more it becomes their posture, their movement, and their default chain. Now this brings us to the real problem with the solutions nowadays. Most of them are not concrete. They are vague. They are phrases, they are ideas that repeat like tradition. Most nowadays repeat something they learned without putting it in practice, and most important, without measuring results. That is key. No measurement, no proof, no direct comparison, no real check of whether the body changed. And because there is no measurement, single exercises get treated like magic bullets. But single exercises that brings absolutely nothing in the big picture become that entire plan. And then the outcome is practically little results to no results. That is why people stay frustrated. That's why people stay confused. And that's why people keep searching for the next thing. Because if the method is not concrete, it can always promise. And if it does not measure results, it never has to admit failure. The person simply gets told to do more. So what is the solution? Using only what I'm saying here. The solution is perfect mobility, not random mobility, not loosen everything. Perfect mobility is where fascia is taught and works best. Because fascia is not decoration, it is connective tissue. It is the network that links the body into a whole structure. And fascia works best, like a tensegrity model works at its best, if all the cords' connective tissue are fully stretched. That's the idea, tensegrity. If the cords are fully stretched and balanced, the structure becomes stable and efficient. If the cords are slack in one place and overloaded in another, the structure collapses and compensates. And the compensation is where you get all the secondary problems. So perfect mobility means perfectly balanced movements, and perfectly balanced movements produce full stretching. Full stretching means stretching into tension of the whole body. At the same time, no isolated, no random, not one muscle at a time, the whole chain at the same time. This is also why I say the solution is widening. Widening over strengthening, because strengthening inside the shortened pattern does not necessarily solve anything. It can just make you stronger in the wrong geometry. Widening changes the geometry, widening changes the organization, and widening gives the body space instead of compression. It is a different direction. But there is another pillar that people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Graphical control. Judging the movement. Because most people live inside the belief they think they are doing it, they feel like they are doing it, they believe they are correcting. But believing is not a proof. And believing you are doing things is ignorance if you refuse to check. It's not wanting to see the real thing. So the solution is conscious guidance and control. Conscious guidance means knowledge. It means you understand what the movement is supposed to be. You define the movement, and defined movements lead to anchors. Anchors are reference points. These anchors are giving your body the support it needs to stand up straight, tall, and confident. Then conscious control means video check. It means accuracy, slow motion, and graphical control. Because video does something painful but necessary. It destroys confidence. Not to shame you, not to attack you, but to show you what you are really doing. Most people have confidence in their feeling, but their feeling is trained by years of wrong movement, so the feeling can be wrong, and the video removes that argument. Video shows you the truth. It shows you are still shortening. It shows you if you are still flaring the ribs. It shows you if you are still retracting or shortening and compressing the neck. It shows you what is actually happening, not what you imagine is happening. So this podcast is less about motivation or routines or hacks. It's about learning to see what you're actually doing, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and posture only changes when thinking changes. This was episode 1. I'm grateful for every like, comment, and subscription. If you want me to cover a specific topic next, write it in the comments. And if you want to watch my full journey, you can subscribe to my Patreon. If you need help, visit postureispower.com. In the meantime, stay lengthened, open your eyes, and I'll see you in the next one.